Welcome to this course on Business Process Management Foundation. My name is Mike Boyle, and I am very glad that you were able to sign up for this course. This lecture will be pretty much an overview of the components to be found within the various sections of this course, and you, Demi. And so let me go ahead and start by describing this model that you see on your screen. Here, I have to be honest, this is my own creation. So, just be careful. If you have any comments about the diagram, please feel free to come straight to me on this. This, more or less, covers the components to be found in this course. So let me go ahead and start by talking about the circle that you find on your screen. And we will start by talking about the component to be found on the top of the circle, and that would be process modeling. Now, process modeling has various functions within business process management. I would say, primarily, it is to be used to define the current state, or the as is why. Well, there are a number of reasons that I'm kind of basing them on my experience inevitably in any organization. And I've walked into, and perhaps this is a depiction of the people I work for. They have never had any documentation of existing processes, so I always had to go and start putting them together myself. And one of the problems that you have within organizations when you start putting them to the processes together in a form that is not visual. I have received the complaint more than once that I was being way too technical, and so it was important to put the processes together in a visual fashion so that people can understand them, that being they were able to say, yes, that's what I do, or they say, no, that's not what I do, or that these parts I do, these parts not really. And so you can use the visual as a way to validate that. Yes, you are capturing the right data for the processes. And of course, to go ahead and put together your process design, which we'll be talking about here shortly, you will be putting that together as a model, which would be your future state. But let's not jump ahead of what we want to cover in this lecture. Let's move on to the bottom description of the circle, which is technology. Now, of course, technology is used at different levels with the business process management. Let me give you a couple of examples. Please don't look at this list as being exclusive. The first one that immediately comes to mind is the technology that we use to go ahead and put the model together to begin with. Very often, a tool like Visio is used. Perhaps you might have heard of the tool coming from Microsoft or something comparable to Visio. There are a number of free versions of process modeling applications to be found within the net, and so that would be one use of technology. Another use of technology would be tied to data analytics, and one of the lectures that we have within the course talks about process mining. Now, within process mining, we are using technology to either depict current processes, what they are, or to what degree they're actually being adhered to, and then the last part would be, how can we actually go ahead and improve on the processes? And so we would be, of course, using all kinds of different technology to perform process mining. Two examples of how technology is used within business process management. Now let's go ahead and continue with the contents to be found within the circle, and we'll go from top to bottom. Process analysis that would be defining, for the most part, the current state, and I alluded to that a little bit within the process modeling. We need to go ahead and play Sherlock Holmes to figure out either what the actual processes are, or perhaps, maybe, whether they are actually being adhered to. That would be another problem we run across quite often. Let's move on to the next part, which would be process design that would be looking at the current at the future state and trying to figure out how best to go ahead and solve the issues tied to the existing processes, either from an from an effectiveness perspective or an efficiency perspective, or you can go the other way around. It makes no difference. And usually the design is iterative. So you're performing various iterations, but obviously I cover all of this much more detail in these subsequent lectures to be found within this compendium. And then lastly, the last box in the components within the circle is covering process transformation. For those of you who perhaps might have worked in project management or something comparable, transformation is inferring that we are performing some sort of change management. So moving from the current state to the future state is a transformation. How do we actually go ahead and do that within business process management? This particular section looks at that change management part. Cool. Okay. Now let's go ahead and move on to the boxes to be found outside of the circle. And I'd like to go ahead and start with the one on the top, which would be process performance. And for the most part, we're talking about metrics and KPIs to determine whether the processes are actually being adhered to, perhaps to monitor the value of the processes, either from an efficiency perspective or effectiveness perspective. And I will be getting to the differences. Between the two, they will be our last two boxes for this lecture. Starting with the one on the left, which would be process organization. Do we have organization that allow for an optimization of executing processes? Do we realize how important processes are within an organization? And we set up our organizations accordingly, more or less tied to the efficiency. And then the last part for this lecture would be looking at the enterprise process management, or how. Are the processes in alignment with our strategy is one lecture that we have within this class looking at the differences between the vision, the why are we here, part the mission, what are we trying to accomplish, part the strategy, how do we actually accomplish it, and the objectives, how do we measure whether we actually accomplish that. Now, you could see certain touch points between the model that you're looking at and that of what I just described, specifically tied to the objectives. There's a clear link between process performance and the objectives. And we need to make sure that we're covering it from an efficiency perspective, that the processes are reliable and they are bringing the value. And then, of course, from an enterprise process management perspective, are we ensuring that the processes are in alignment with our strategy? So this is basically the course in a nutshell. Obviously, we go into various levels of abstraction with regards to material, but this is really what this course is going to be about. I hope you found some value in that description I just gave you, and I would say, let's go ahead and move on to the next lecture. Thank